Alright, so Rose Namajunas just lost to Erin Blanchfield this past Saturday at UFC Edmonton, and my god, it's just insane how far she has fallen in her career in less than 3 years. And I know that a lot of you guys are going to read the title of this video and think that I'm referencing Rose and Pat Barry's relationship, which, you know, is definitely weird and worth questioning in my opinion. Like I'm just saying, when they met, she was 14 and he was 27. I don't know, it's kind of strange, not gonna lie. But whether or not Pat groomed her is not the point of this video, because I want to focus on how her career, reputation, and skill set has fallen off of a massive cliff since phasing out Trevor Wittman starting in May of 2022. And based on how she's looked in her recent performances, I really don't think that it's a coincidence that her leaving Trevor Wittman's training directly correlates with her decline. Moreover, as you can probably imagine, I absolutely think it's worth scrutinizing Pat Barry himself for how Rose's success has gone down the shitter, and I'll be discussing all of this throughout this video. Wittman started training her prior to her even being in the Ultimate Fighter Season 20 and was her lead cornerman in her very first UFC fight against Carla Esparza in the finals of that season. But over the course of her next 10 fights in the promotion, Trevor was front and center as her main cornerman, and along the way they went 8-2 together and captured and defended the strawweight title not once but twice. I'm not gonna lie, throughout her career, I've been a pretty big skeptic about Rose whenever she walked into the biggest fights of her life. Like, I definitely thought that she was going to lose in the first Joanna fight, and honestly, I picked against her again in the rematch, but her performance in the second Joanna fight was probably more impressive than the first. I also picked against her when she went into the first Zhang Wei Li fight, where this would be the last time that Trevor was her lead cornerman, and we all know how this fight went. All this to say, I really believe that the partnership of Namajunas as the fighter, Wittman as the trainer and head cornerman, and even Barry as second cornerman and moral support figure worked really well. I don't even really think that this is something that I should even have to try to convince people on either. You can just look at the improvements that she made in her game, as well as the results during this time period, and that should be proof enough in how effective this trio was. And you know what? As the old saying goes, you don't fix what ain't broken. You don't fuck with a winning formula, and that's exactly what she did. In a weird way, I kind of think that it might have been better for her overall career if she lost the second Zhang fight, because maybe then she wouldn't have made the decision to switch up her coaching lineup the way that she did. Because in her next fight, which is the now infamous Carla Esparza rematch at UFC 274, not only was Wittman once again sidelined as the secondary cornerman, I get the feeling that he didn't even train her for this fight either, just based on the fact that Barry was the one giving much of the strategic advice in between rounds. I tried to do a little bit of research on whether or not Wittman was in charge of her camp for this event, but unfortunately I couldn't find anything one way or the other, but I really do get the feeling that Pat was in charge of her training and game planning for this one. Oh boy, now we have officially entered the post-Trevor Wittman era of Rose's legacy, and if you're watching this video right now, then you'll know that she hasn't been nearly as successful or impressive without him. And when I say post-Trevor Wittman era, I mean that not only does she no longer have Trevor in her corner at all anymore, but Pat is now her official head coach and trainer. But it's like, you know, in all fairness, does it really seem like all that bad of an idea to swap out Trevor Wittman with Pat Barry? Yes, it fucking is. Yeah, dude, let's just leave the tutelage of the guy who not only made you a two-time champion, but the same guy who made Kamaru Usman and Justin Gaethje champions, and also trained guys like Corey Sandhagen, Shane Carwin, and Nate Marquardt. Compare that to the stellar track record of Pat Barry, who's trained literally no one. It's pretty clear why this was a terrible idea from the jump. And it's funny because according to Rose herself, during the lead up to the Manon Fiorot fight, she announced that Trevor wouldn't be in her corner for the first time in close to a decade, simply because she wanted him to focus on training Justin Gaethje for his rematch against Dustin Poirier.
Nothing to do with Pat. It has everything to do with me and Gaethje and him having a fight with the BMF and all that stuff, and I did not want to interfere, and I stayed back. And there's more to it than that, but for the most part, that's all, you know, I think I want to say about that, because... But I really don't buy this in the slightest, seeing as for UFC 268, Wittman trained and cornered Namajunas, Gaethje, and Usman in 3 very high-profile matchups, and all of them won their fights that night. So yeah, the idea that she wanted to be courteous of his time and energy doesn't really seem all that believable to me. I'm just saying, if Rose actually wanted Trevor to corner her against Fiorot, then I'm positive that he would have been willing and able to. Not only that, when Namajunas fought at UFC 251 and UFC 261, she shared those
those cards with Usman, and they both won their fights at both of those events, so Wittman has consistently demonstrated being able to train and coach multiple athletes simultaneously. I don't know, man, this just seems like a very flimsy excuse that really doesn't hold up even under the slightest level of scrutiny, and if you're asking me, from the outside looking in, it seems pretty apparent that she most likely cut ties with Wittman so that she and Pat can do their own thing. With that being said, I don't know why this would be the case. Personally, I think that the most likely scenario is that he convinced her that she wasn't getting enough attention and focus from Wittman and that they would be better off moving forward by themselves. Maybe they could have gotten into a personal feud with each other in one way or another, or maybe it's as simple as them having fundamental disagreements with Rose's training and they separated, who really knows? I mean, I guess there is the chance that they just amicably parted ways, but even by her own admission, she says that there's more to the story than just wanting to let Wittman focus on Gaethje's fight, and I can't help but wonder what the details are. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to insinuate that there was any foul play going on or anything, I'm just saying I think that there is probably more deep-seated reasons for Rose and Pat leaving Trevor than the story that she's trying to sell us. Like, if she simply wanted Wittman and Gaethje to have more one-on-one time together for his BMF title fight, then why hasn't he been in her corner since? Also, why is she now being trained exclusively by Pat? Like, they clearly wanted out and they got out, and I think it's impossible to deny that they made a mistake in doing so. Because after losing to Fiorot, Namajunas has followed up her next 3 fights by winning 2 lackluster decisions against Amanda Ribas and Tracy Cortez, and even though she got the dub in those fights, I would be lying if I said I was very impressed by those performances. I mean, Ribas is kind of decent, but let's be real here, Cortez is mediocre at best, and I really feel like the Rose of old would have made easy work of either girl. And then of course this past weekend, Namajunas lost a decision in a sloppy and hard to watch fight against Erin Blanchfield, where personally I feel like Erin is a super one-dimensional fighter that Rose should have beaten if she was given proper preparation and instruction heading into the fight. And I know that some of you guys are going to say that she's fighting at a heavier weight class now, so of course the fights are going to be harder, but what about Carla Esparza? Carla should be fighting at atom weight realistically, and Rose fought like she was terrified of her. I'll definitely cut Namajunas a little bit of slack on the Fiorot fight because I think that Fiorot is actually a really solid fighter, but when it comes to her fight against Erin, even during Rose's best moments of the fight, it was still clear that she's taken noticeable steps back in her game. I feel like her volume and activity have gone down drastically. She seems way more hesitant than she used to be, and she definitely doesn't have the same sort of flow when it comes to her combinations that she had in her fights against Joanna or Zhang. And before you guys start typing in the comments about who am I to criticize a pro fighter when I am not a pro fighter, dude, anyone with eyes can see that she's not the same level of athlete that she used to be. I don't need to be a UFC fighter myself to look at the Rose of today and be able to see that her striking game has regressed since being trained full-time by Barry. Compare the way that she looked in either of the Joanna fights or the Zhang fights versus how she fights today, and I think that we would all be able to agree that she doesn't operate at as high of a frequency anymore. Hell, even when up to the point where she got dumped on her head by Jessica Andrade, her striking looked incredible, or at least way better than it does now. Pat Barry is ruining Rose Namajunas' career, and the worst part about it is that right now she should be in her prime of fighting abilities, not taking noticeable steps backwards. She's 32 years old right now. Compare this to Amanda Nunes at 32, who was dominating 2 different divisions, or Valentina Shevchenko, who at 32 was running the flyweight division, or Chris Cyborg, who's been decimating nearly everyone she's fought for damn near 2 decades at this point. And I'm sure that she believes that Pat is the ideal trainer for her, seeing as they're married, and they both probably believe that their personal connection with one another is conducive for optimal training, but it's pretty clear to me now that we're 2 years into this little science experiment that Pat's instruction has done more harm than good. I get that she loves the guy, and I get that she believes he has her best interests at heart, but if her dopey-ass husband convinced her to leave one of the best MMA coaches in the world who made her a UFC champion so that he can train her after having a non-existent track record of success, then I'm not totally sure that he's looking out for her the way that she thinks he is. With all this being said, Pat is a terrible coach and probably an even worse trainer. Alright, that's the video for today. Definitely let me know what you think about Rose's career in its current state. Do you think that Pat has only done damage to her legacy since becoming her trainer like I do, or do you think she's somehow better off with him steering the ship? As always, if you like the video, then like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.